this is Nicole Klein with Exhibit Expressions. We are kicking off our series about why in the world in trade shows with our friend Brady Tinkham of Champion Logistics. Brady is here as our guru on the wild world of logistics, trade shows, freight, and all that fun stuff. So Brady, thanks for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the invite. Yeah, I really appreciate getting the opportunity to help educate everybody.
Yeah, great. So, I was really curious how you found yourself in the wild world of freight. You've been in it a while. I've known you for a while, and you've been in it for a while.
It has been, yes. I was a young 25-year-old kid who was in an engineering job in Atlanta, and then they were about to move me to a more undesirable part of the country, and I wasn't having it. So my roommate at the time was a freight salesman. I'd never really thought about freight or anything like that. But he invited me to dinner to meet one of his industry companions one night, and then that dinner ended up turning into an interview, which ended up turning into a job 2 months later. And before I knew it, I was a freight salesman, just like my roommate. So it was one fateful dinner turned into a job, and that was the summer of 2000 and fall of 2015. Sorry, 2005. So here we are 16 years later. It's still in the same job. Yeah, haven't looked back. It's been a ride. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, literally a ride. Freight's one of those aspects of our industry that is it's a really substantial expense for our clients, and yet it's so essential because their exhibit properties have to get where they need to get exactly when they need to be there. There's a precision to it, and that's why we count on partners like you guys to make sure, because you understand the specifics, the ins and outs of this industry. It's not like you can put it on any truck. So, over the years, I've learned some things. Like there's some terminology in this industry that I've had to learn, and they really kind of impact costs greatly. So like things like LTL and van line, air ride, freight forwarding. Can you help us define some of that vocabulary for me?
Sure. The first one you mentioned, LTL, is an acronym for less than truckload, which basically means you're shipping something that's sharing a truck with other shipments. So it's not going to go necessarily point A to point B on the same truck all the way through. So LTL, and with that in mind, it's important to know that that shipment may go on and off a truck several times, be handled with a forklift. So it needs to be packaged appropriately, where if it gets handled with a forklift, if something falls off, you could lose something as part of the shipment. So LTL, less than truckload. You didn't mention it, but TL, it's truckload, is an acronym for truckload, meaning you are shipping something on the same truck from point A to point B. It's not going to come off the truck. It's not going to be handled with a forklift. So that's the main two different main types of freight: truckload and less than truckload. You'd mentioned, I think, van line.
Mm-hmm.
Van line is just the traditional household moving companies, the Allies, North Americans, Uniteds. They are household movers. They also move freight in the trade show realm, but when you say van line, that's typically refers to household movers. And you mentioned freight forwarding.
Yep.
That's a term that's international. So there's international freight forwarders that ship freight by air, by truck, by rail, by ocean. And that's a whole different realm. But a domestic freight forwarder is a company, and Champion has the capability of doing freight forwarding, as many trade show logistics companies do. Basically means that the freight is moving domestically on a truck from point A to point B, and it typically moves quicker than a standard LTL shipment, where it might take 1 or 2 weeks, and it's a little bit more liable for shipping things through freight forwarding, the smaller LTL shipments. So it's a pretty common name, terminology in the trade show world for LTL shipping.
So how would you define your primary services? What glossary terms should we know for what you guys do?
Okay, so we've mentioned freight forwarding, which a certain segment of trade show shipments use freight forwarding, the smaller LTL. We move freight in a method called partial truckload or also known as quarter truckloads, half truckloads. So we'll work with several exhibit houses in a metro area, say Atlanta, and we'll pick up multiple shipments on a truck. It'll stay in that truck, go all the way to, let's say, Vegas, and ship as a partial truckload. So you're essentially buying the space on the truck. A quarter truck which is about 6 or 7 pallets of freight. So a half truck was about 13. A full truck is about 26. So a partial truckload is basically you're buying a portion of that truck for that ride from, let's say, Atlanta to Vegas, as opposed to a truckload where you're buying a whole truck, or freight forwarding, you're just paying for 1 or 2 little pallets or something like that. So that's relatively unique to Champion, just because we have so many customers in specific markets that are going to, let's say, the same show, Vegas, Anaheim, Dallas, Orlando. Our headquarters is in Chicago, so we also have a big customer base and trade shows in Chicago. So we run a lot of partial truckloads in and out of that market as well.
So you consolidate a truck based on a trade show often? Correct,
yeah. And a lot of times it even goes to the same show on the same day. So if it works out great that way, you're essentially getting dedicated service for the price of a half truck.
So those are good terms. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about and know about? Acronyms or funny little terms you guys use that we should know?
I personally am not an acronym guy. I don't like using acronyms. But as far as terms, air ride is a pretty common term in the industry. A lot of people want air ride trucks because they might be shipping machinery that's relatively fragile. And air ride basically means that the suspension on the trailer is like a rubber bladder filled with air, as opposed to a spring, which is bounces up and down a lot more. So picture a truck going over railroad tracks. If it's on a spring, you'll see that those wheels bounce over the railroad tracks. But if you're air ride, it's much more of a smoother ride. So I think about 75% of all trucks being manufactured now are air ride, just because the technology's improved. And just about every truck that travels long distances, interstate trucks, the full 53-foot trucks, are air ride. So it's good to know that your freight is not getting bounced around, so to speak, with spring ride trucks. But local box trucks are still, for the most part, spring ride.
So if the client's transporting delicate equipment, we should double check and make sure that it's going to have an air ride truck, or?
Correct. Yes, it's worth mentioning that. Yes, this is delicate. It's always worth mentioning, regardless if you're shipping something that's susceptible to handling or is a high value. It's worth mentioning that up front, and we'll make sure we move the freight in the most appropriate way.
Perfect.
Yeah, I did mention something, and I've heard a lot of different numbers, but a full-size truck that travels interstate is 53 feet long. The old length was 48 feet. Those have been phased out over the last 30 and 40 years. Those trailers still exist, but for the most part, freight ships in a 53-foot truck in interstate. I've heard 51 feet, 52 feet, but 53 is the actual number. So.
And you guys play a game of Tetris in those 53 feet, right?
Oh my gosh, I just did yesterday actually for a client. They're shipping to FabTech, and I guess this year they're not charging special handling, so we had to play Tetris to make sure all the crates would fit inside the truck without any going over the end of the back of the truck. So yeah, so I'm a professional Tetriser, so to speak.
So for all those kids out there, or those of us like me who still like to play Tetris, freight could be a good career for us.
There you go. Perfect. You've already got a leg up.
I hadn't thought about that one. I love what I do. So but understanding what our partners go through is really important too. So yeah.